It's been too long since I did a hardware video, and I thought with it being the 10-year anniversary of the GameCube's release in Japan, it might be fun to throw together a little video about Nintendo's awesome rectangular cuboid. The GameCube was released in Japan on September 14th, 2001, and went on to conquer the gaming world. Not actually. It's generally thought of as not being a great success, but it's hard for me to think of a console that sold over 20 million units worldwide as a failure, even if it finished a bit behind the Xbox and well behind the PlayStation 2 in sales. The GameCube is still the home to many great games, but today I mainly want to talk about the console itself. It's one of my favorite looking consoles. Its design sort of bridges the gap between a toy and something mysterious. 'Cause cubes are pretty mysterious, right? Like, what's inside the box? A whole bunch of awesome, that's what. And it has a handle. It's also quite a contrast to its competitors, especially the Xbox, as it's small and quiet. It's got a single exhaust fan over here that draws air over all the awesome insides, but doesn't make a lot of noise. But just because it's efficiently designed doesn't mean it's not powerful. The GameCube produced excellent graphics and sound for its time. So let's take a closer look at the console. On the top are your power and reset buttons, and the button to open the lid so you can put in a game. On the lid itself is the standard GameCube nameplate, but some limited editions of the console would replace this with an alternate design. On the front there's this large plate that surrounds the 4 controller ports and 2 memory card slots, and they kinda look like 2 faces on the front of the console. On the back, you've got the port to connect the power supply, the analog AV output for audio and composite video, along with S-video on NTSC consoles and RGB on PAL machines. A cool thing about this port is that you could use the same video cables that the Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64 used. But if you want to use progressive scan video for the games that supported it, you would use this digital AV output. But at least in North America, it was hard to get the component cables so you could use it. In fact, I remember it being easier to just get the Japanese cable, which works fine on North American consoles. But back then, Nintendo said that very few people actually used the digital AV out, so they eliminated it from GameCubes made after May 2004. The digital AV out also has audio, as you might have guessed by the A in AV. It's digital audio, but it's a format I'm not familiar with. I don't know anything about it, and in fact, Nintendo never made a cable that had a digital audio output. The regular component cable actually lacked audio, so you had to still use your standard AV cable if you wanted sound. On the bottom of the console, there's 3 ports hiding under these covers. The high-speed port right here is where you'd plug in your Gameboy Player. Serial port 1 was used for the 56K modem and broadband adapter, although only 4 games supported online play. One was a Japanese-only release called Homeland, and the other 3 were Phantasy Star Online games from Sega. There's also 3 LAN-capable games that use the broadband adapter: Mario Kart Double Dash, Kirby Air Ride, and 1080 Avalanche. And these can also be played over the internet with appropriate tunneling software installed on your computer. The last port is Serial Port 2, which I don't think was ever used, at least not for any commercially available product. And in fact, like the digital AV output, this port was removed from later GameCubes. The GameCube was available in multiple colors and was released in both indigo and black, but in their promotion and advertising, Nintendo seemed to emphasize the indigo color, and this kinda gave the impression, at least in North America, that this purple console was made for kids. Which is true, all consoles are made for kids. And adults. All ages of people play games. Sometimes non-people too. Another standard color in Japan was Spice, which as you can see is a very bright orange. And you also notice that this being a later model, it lacks the digital AV output and also the serial port 2. This might be my favorite looking GameCube. I really love how intense it is, and it's too bad we didn't get this color in North America. But we did eventually get Platinum, and this here is actually my first GameCube. I got it in 2003, and when this color was introduced, it was advertised as being a limited edition, but In fact, Platinum GameCubes were available all the way to the end of the console's life. I've also got the Gameboy Player attached, and we'll take a quick look at that later. The last GameCube that I have is the Pearl White model. This is a PAL console. It came bundled with Mario Smash Football in Europe. I don't know if it was available separately. It's a really nice satiny white color, and I just like it a lot, and yes, I am addicted to GameCubes. None of the GameCubes I have are rare, but there are several limited editions like the cool-looking Red Gundam Edition GameCube and the popular DVD player GameCube hybrid from Panasonic known as the Q, so there's plenty of different models available if you're into collecting hardware. GameCube games came on these mini DVDs that held 1.5 gigabytes of data. This was a lot less than the full-sized DVDs that the PS2 and Xbox used, and sometimes video or audio files on the disc would be more compressed to be able to fit, or in rare occasions the game would be split across two discs. GameCube discs have a two-tone color scheme for disc art. There are some that are all one color or a little different in some way, but generally they all have a similar consistent look. The game cases were standard DVD-sized cases in North America and Europe, but in Japan, games came in these small cases with a cardboard sleeve. The GameCube is an easy console to import games for. Just boot with the freeloader disc, and you'll be able to play games from other regions. Since Japan and North America use the NTSC video standard, I haven't had any issues with Japanese games. PAL games that have a 60Hz mode may also work. V-Rally 3 does. But this is the only PAL game I have, so I can't verify any others. Of course, to play these games you need a controller, and the GameCube sure did have a controller. Everyone is different, but to me this is one of the most comfortable controllers I've ever used. It's just really easy to hold. It's got two great analog triggers with an extra button click when you push them all the way in. I like the button layout and even the C stick. It's not perfect though. The Z button is nice in that the way it's placed you won't accidentally hit it, but if a game requires its repeated use, it can be a little clumsy. I also wish the analog sticks were clickable, giving you extra buttons, as that's a nice feature that the PS2 and Xbox controllers had. Finally, the D-pad is not the best if you need to use it a lot. It feels fine, it's just really tiny, and it's hard to be accurate with it. This is my original Platinum controller, and the color on these is just painted on, and you can see it's worn away on some parts of mine after all the use it's had. But of course the controllers came in many different colors. A couple of note are this emerald one, which I think was only released in Japan, and this white one, which Nintendo released to match the Wii. The cable length on these is a little shy of 6.5 feet, although the white controller's cable is around 10 feet. But if that's still not long enough, or you just hate wires, Nintendo offered the excellent Wavebird wireless controller. It has a little receiver that plugs into a controller port, and you just match the channel on the controller to the channel on the receiver, and then you're good to go. After you put a couple AA batteries into the controller. Besides lacking the rumble feature, its functionality is the same as a standard GameCube controller. Another popular choice is the Hori Digital Controller. It's basically a GameCube controller combined with a Super Nintendo gamepad. It came in either indigo or black, and it was marketed for use with the Gameboy Player, and it is great for that. The D-pad is much larger and nicer than the standard controllers, and it just feels good to use with Game Boy games. It obviously lacks the analog sticks, but it can still be used for games that didn't require them, like fighters or compilations of old arcade games. I have the Japanese version of this, and it was only around $20 new back when it was being made, but it seems to go for 3 to 4 times that amount on eBay these days, or even more. It's a nice controller, but I'm not sure it's worth that much, but I leave that judgment up to your brain and hands. Now, since you have games, and a controller to play them with, you also need someplace to save your progress, like a memory card. Nintendo had 3 different ones, all named by how many blocks of storage they had. The Memory Card 59, this is the one that was included with Animal Crossing, the Memory Card 251, and the Memory Card 1019. The 1019 is great. I've got about 100 save files on here, and it's still got 57 blocks left. I don't have any experience with third-party memory cards, but I've never had any issues with the official Nintendo cards. The last thing I want to talk about is Nintendo's great add-on for the GameCube, the Gameboy Player. This attaches securely to the bottom of your GameCube and adds about an inch to its height. It also adds the ability to play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games. In North America, we only got the player in black, but in Japan you could get it in black, indigo, spice, or platinum to match your console. The games go right in here, there's a port for Game Boy accessories, and there's a lever on the side to eject the game. In order to use this add-on, you need to boot your GameCube with the startup disc, which comes in a case like Japanese games come in. Once powered up, you have options for screen size, framing around the game window, and other things. And the Game Boy Player works in progressive scan if you've got the cable and TV for it. I like playing Game Boy games on the original hardware, but sometimes it's nice to see the games on a bigger screen. The Game Boy Player is a pretty awesome add-on. And the GameCube itself is pretty awesome as well. While you can play the games on your Wii, getting a GameCube console used is really cheap these days, and might be fun to pick up just for your collection. Or pick up more than one if you're crazy. Go crazy for GameCube. It would do the same for you. Just give it a second. Alright, I guess it's not going to do anything crazy. Oh, there he goes.